All right. Hello and welcome back to the channel. Very special guest with me today, Andy Scrase, who is the VFX supervisor for the Wheel of Time season 2 and 3. Did I get that right?
That's correct. Yeah, season 2 and season 3. That's where the journey began, should we call it?
Where it begins. One of the first things that I wanted to talk about is I think one of the noticeable factors for me moving in from season 2 and 3 is that we're getting a lot more ideas on what channeling can look like, whether that just be how the VFX are in general, but also what channelers are able to do, like with Alana in season 3 with her ice spears, or I think in season 2, we had one of the yellow Aes Sedai using these weaves where she's kind of like constricting her opponent. It's got like this helix look, and then this Shan woman just kind of like crumples down to the ground. And so we're getting a lot more imaginative ideas on how this magic can be used. And I wanted to ask if this was a type of discussion between you and your team and everyone that you're working with, how to kind of make things a little bit more interesting and do more with the magic.
I'd say that most of that is an outcome of one of Rafe's biggest desires on the show is I want to see something that hasn't been done before. So he's doesn't really allow me to repeat myself too much with certain things. I mean, the whole magic system in the Wheel of Time, I think, is very unique. It's not particularly restrictive. It's got a lot of variables in it. I mean, for us, the threads of one power always stay the same. These kind of glowing white lines and these extra bright accents that flow through it as well to help convey movement. But then beyond that, you have some maneuverability in how it forms around someone, the layout around someone, how it behaves as well, the quantity they use. And I think that's probably the most interesting aspect of it is that we can have the threads of channeling, but they can be executed in many, many different ways. And I'd say, in the show, we've got several examples of that. Aes Sedai, there's this kind of very flowy, I'd almost call it organic in a way, that it goes around. With the Forsaken, it's very almost scientific based. The words I usually use for it is sci-fi and geometric, because we wanted their channel to feel very clean and minimalist at the same time. So they just, they're kind of experts of channeling, and to almost look down on the Aes Sedai as Neanderthals when using it. So they're very precise and minimalist in what they do. And then when we come into, season 3, we also have the Windfinder channeling from the Sea Folk ship. So that had, again, very flowy and big in its look. But then we had this Aurora Borealis look to it as well, which again was something that came about from Rafe and the script stage. So we factored that in as well. So I think that's kind of like the most important, most interesting part of it, is you kind of don't get bored of creating it because there's so many different things you can do with it. I haven't even really touched on the Damane in season 2, where the channeling was kind of restricted, almost like a cage around their forearms, representing really about how they're very much restricted and a slave to the Sul'dam. So yeah, as I say, you've got the basis, and then you can build on that and branch it out into many, many different areas, which makes it, I think, a really interesting magic system that you don't really get bored of because you can be so creative with it.
Yeah. When you get a brief or when you get a task with, okay, we want to have this scene, is there one type that kind of gets you really excited? Or, I mean, is it all just like new and exciting all the time?
I think it's new and exciting, I think, is all the time. We tend, as I say, not to repeat ourselves really in the show too much.
Yeah.
I think anything to do with fire channeling is always pretty fun. Fire channeling always looks the most striking, just because of those colors that are used, the fiery embers that emit off of the fire channeling as well. We always have this sort of signature of each of the 5 powers that's emitted from the channeling. So the show really keeps me on my toes, I would say. So you don't really have a chance to either be bored or look forward to things. You just know if it's challenge after challenge after challenge, which is enjoyable in itself. I'd say in visual effects, fantasy and sci-fi are probably the peak for creativity in visual effects, because it's so kind of otherworldly, and it usually involves a lot of creative thought, and it's just something that's everything feels a little bit different, than having to just do buildings or explosions, etc. As what we do sometimes in visual effects as our standard work. So no, I think it's incredibly creatively fulfilling.
Yeah.
Just as a kind of a job to work on.
When you came into season 2, was there anything that just kind of, like, generally surprised you about the Wheel of Time? Because I'm sure you walked in knowing it's a fantasy. I'm sure you probably checked out a little bit of it before you started working on the show, but was there anything that was just kind of, like, weird or, like, just interesting and surprising for you? Because you've worked on a lot of
I,
sci-fi.
yeah, I'd say there were three things I think that were really kind of a bit unusual. First one was when I knew I was coming onto the show and I put the audiobook on for Eye of the World, and I saw how long it was. And then I found out it was like 15 books of this series. I was like, oh my God, I feel like I could put these books under a car and change a tire with
Yes.
it. It was like, that was quite surprised about how long they were. So to kind of knuckle down to get through that. So just the sheer size of the books, I think, caught me by
Yeah.
surprise. Secondly, I think was the fandom.
Okay.
How passionate they were, borderline slightly scary sometimes with how it is. But I'd say like the as I say, I think within the show, there's got lots of fans of the show, and you get those who critique the show. But I think it always comes down to you're all the same. The fact you all just love the books and you love the story of the Wheel of Time. So I've got a massive respect for that, and it's really easy to feed off of that
Yeah.
passion. It helps to kind of drive us a little bit, I'd say, in realizing how much time and dedication and thought that we need to put into it, because there's an expectation in that. So I'd say that very kind of committed, almost diehard ultra fan base, I think was quite revealing to me. And then the third thing was how to pronounce
Oh my
half the
gosh.
names in Wheel of Time. Kyrene really dropped. I mean, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Kyrene really tripped people up on season 2 when I was talking in with my team, and then with the visual effects vendor working on it. There have been some very interesting pronunciations of names in the VFX community. Have worked on it over season 2 and 3. So yeah, that's probably even the hardest one, is dealing with the name
Even
pronunciation.
the even the audiobook
Yeah.
narrators have issues from time to time where you'll catch a name one way and then later on it's something else, and it's like it's okay. There's thousands of names. There's so many places. I am very forgiving.
I swear Ruidian changes pronunciation in the audiobook about 2 or 3 times. I'm sure of it when I listen to it.
Yeah. Speaking of Ruidion, I know when we were chatting before this started, you were like, "You really love your Age of Legends stuff," and I'm like, "Yeah, I really, really do." And I think for me, going into the Wheel of Time, it starts out as this kind of folksy, medieval almost fantasy, at least the way that it's described in the books, and then you kind of get to Ruidion, and you're seeing these different types of locations based on the different periods of time, and you're just like, "Okay, wow, how do you" it's very hard to imagine, and I think for me, I'm not one of those readers where I can so clearly visualize something. So for me, one of the aspects of going into the show that was so exciting is getting to actually see how this is interpreted by someone else besides me kind of struggling to, like, think about how something would look like, and then we get to Ruidion and we actually get to see the breaking of the world in this concept shot where it's the wagons kind of rushing out of this structure, and then in the background, these, like, fires in the sky, and it was one of those moments for me where it was just, like, chilling, like a goosebumps moment where it's like, "Wow, like, we're finally getting to see this on TV," which was just really incredible. but I wanted to ask you a little bit about this moment because it almost has this like volcanic eruption type feel, just these fires being shot straight up into the sky. It was so cool.
Yeah, it's I mean, I'm visual effects, so my mind is extremely visual based. As soon as I read any sort of line, I get a picture in my mind straight away. Being kind of a child of the 80s and
Yeah.
90s, it usually pops to something from the 80s or 90s straight away, which isn't a bad thing. I'm really pleased that inspires me. But I think at any time I've read anything in Wheel of Time, I bang, immediately I've got an image in my head. So, because I'm a really visual person,
Yeah.
very kind of arty. That's always been my basis. I loved drawing when I was really young, and I love being a visual person. So incorporating or interpreting, sorry, words from the book, I find incredibly easy. But then you need to factor in kind of working for the director, or in this case with Rafe, the showrunner, what their desires are. And Rafe's really great because he gives me a lot of freedom. A lot of the time his briefing is, and he just make it look cool. So it's great. And then I love to gather reference and research stuff a lot, and share that reference and research as well. And in case of kind of like Ruidium, Ruidian and Age of Legends, the design of the buildings share something in common, because it was a case of you have them all leaving with the Avendus Oratory in their wagons from the Age of Legends during the breaking of the world, essentially. And they go off into the desert and they build Ruidian. I think it's the Genii, if I remember correctly, who build it. So we wanted this similarity between the Age of Legends buildings and them going off into the desert to build Ruidian, which is inspired by essentially the Age of Legends buildings, or how they think the Age of Legends buildings are created. So in terms of design influence, brutalism plays a huge part, with a little bit of kind of 1920s Art Deco in there, with some of the curves that exist. So we've got those two sort of eras of architecture come together to create these big monumental buildings. But it's definitely a different, we definitely have a deliberate choice that we wanted Ruidin itself to reflect Age of Legends, because that's kind of the age that they
Yeah.
came from. And then we talk about this, in our Age of Legends moments in 304, seeing this breaking happening in the background. We've got breaking, all the male channelers going mad. For that, because I knew it always needed to be something in the distance, I needed something that looked really striking. And so I wanted something that felt almost apocalyptic or biblical.
Definitely.
In a way, so I looked at
Yeah.
kind of, lots of religious paintings I looked at. They expired it, and then we had these, I think I call them like volcanic beams almost, going up into the skies and breaking on. It just looks so dramatic, and coincidentally tied in really well with Fires of Heaven.
Yeah.
Not deliberately so, or maybe subconsciously I did it. But yeah, I think, I'm really pleased at how that stuff came out, especially because you had this really interesting architecture that wasn't classically kind of sci-fi futuristic. Rafe likes us to try and avoid that. He really likes the more simplistic, brutalist sort of architectures. Definite design choice from him, or something that he likes. And then just kind of having that backdrop of those volcanic beams that go into the air just gave a really powerful, striking image. And I really love creating those.
It turned out really cool. I mean, that moment and then seeing the Shirom for me. I mean, also, like, the Shirom looks awesome. When I had talked to Andre Nekvasil in season 2, I was asking him, "What type of inspirations do you have for Age of Legends type stuff?" And he snuck me in a little Easter egg for season 3. I didn't realize it at the time, but he said there was this architect, I think Claude Nicolas Ledoux from the
Mhm.
1800s, that created futuristic architecture. And none of it really came to fruition, but he pulls out a book and he's like, "Yeah, like this," and it's this globe. And I'm like, "Yeah, that's very cool." And then season 3 airs, and I'm like, "Ah, that was it. That was it." But
Andre was Easter egging on you without you even knowing it, which is brilliant. I know the imagery you're talking about. I had actually looked at that as well,
yeah,
because I know Andre had actually referenced it to you. So I'd check that out. I think with the Shirom, you're always going to come across some slight design, I won't say stereotypes, but any sort of
Star
floating
Wars.
globe. is going to be compared to the Death
Yeah.
Star or something similar, you know. Or I can even think of the Emperor ship in Dune Part
Mm.
Two. You know, all those kind of things it gets referenced to. But I didn't want to shy away and do something completely different. I wanted to stay quite true to the books and that. As I say, in the work I do, I try to stay true to the books as much as I can, unless I feel like it's kind of going to be something that's visually a little underwhelming or repetitive. But with the Shirom now, it's like, no, it needs to be this big white floating
Yeah.
orb in the sky. And so for that, I looked at the orb from Burning Man. It was one reference. There was this in Scandinavia, I think in Sweden, might even be Stockholm, something, I want to say it's called like the Ericsson, it used to be called like the Ericsson dome or globe or something like this. Had this little kind of circular porthole windows, and it's made up of kind of big tiles. That was a big inspiration as well. And then we added a little kind of little aerials on top of the Shrom as well, just to make it feel a little different, because if I remember correctly, in the Age of Legends, the power source is broadcast. So I like this idea of adding the aerials at the top to receive this broadcast of
Yeah.
power. So yeah, you can come across certain designs, I think, or with the briefing of the Shrom specifically, you're going to come across things from other movies or TV shows quite easily. But as I say, I don't think that's a reason not to do it, because I still think, especially the book readers, there's an expectation to still see that big giant floating white pearl in the
Yeah.
sky, I think is how it's described. And so we just went fully committed into it. And I was really pleased with how it actually got received, and that we took that sort of design
Was that
choice with it.
surprising for you? Because we've got all of this just
Mm-hmm.
incredible, massive amounts of channeling, and then people are like, "Ah, the floating white ball." Like, yes.
A floating golf ball got the biggest attention. Yeah, it did. That really surprised me. And the other thing was, we have the boring into the Dark One's prison,
Yeah.
and the way we represented that with the sky cracking. I'm pretty sure in the script it's written like about the sky cracking. So I imagine, what if we have it like shattering from the center outwards? That might be a really cool look. And then revealing the Dark One kind of through a tiny hole. That went down really, really well. I wasn't expecting that at all. I was really surprised
Yeah.
by it. The Dark One, we wanted to feel almost like as an entity, so not like kind of sort of
Right.
human form. And things like dark matter are a big inspiration there. And Rafe always wanted us to have a very kind of bright horizon for the Dark One's appearance as well, because the Dark One isn't just about being bad. It's about bringing balance. So kind of that dark and light was, again, a very deliberate choice from us. And then sound added like an amazing, really otherworldly noise to it that I think really, really, really helped sell it.
Yeah. The Dark One, I think, again, that's one of these situations for me where when you're reading the books, it's like, okay, it's this sentient, sapient entity of darkness, but how do you visualize that? And I think for me watching something like that, it's like that's exactly like what it should be. That kind of like it's kind of like almost chipping outward and almost falling into places where you can feel like it kind of like bending and there's still movement, but it's still so like firm in the sky. It's just a really cool visual way to show like something that's very hard to describe, which I mean Robert Jordan, he gave us the words that are there, but I think it's always interesting to see like how that can come to life in a way. And yeah, the Dark One is like, what is it? And so
Yeah, yeah. I always think of like a godlike
yeah.
entity. So my mind always went to things like 2001: Space Odyssey. When you're getting towards the end of that, or I want to say Star Trek: Final Frontier. Those kind of things. So I never imagined that we'd be doing something that was almost human or alien in appearance. I always imagined it this kind of floating, almost like a nebula
Yeah.
kind of way. That sort of design to it, and And I think we were right with doing that. You know, the dark one is this entity that exists, and I think it makes it way more mysterious when it's not a kind of a human representation of them or something like that. It feels a bit more sort of unknown, and I think with unknown comes a certain amount of fear, especially in the human
Yeah.
psyche. So yeah, I was really happy with that, and that light and dark contrasting against each other. That again, I think is a really sort of fun but simplistic and effective
Yeah, I
choice.
think, I mean, even just like the colors of everything, just it, I mean, that's like poster worthy. It was so cool to see. I wanted to talk a little bit about inspirations and stuff like that because I had seen on Blue Sky you had posted some Caspar David Friedrich images, and was it Monet also? Yeah.
Monet's studies of London in the
Yeah, this
mist. Yeah,
kind of
that's right.
blue color, and then in comparison to like Ruidion. I wanted to ask because you are such a visual person, and I'm assuming you have like a pretty big background in art as a whole. Was there more stuff like that where you were kind of pulling inspiration from throughout the season that people haven't maybe tons?
Tons, so much so I don't think I could list them all. As I say, so we use this kind of online live ideas board platform. It's called Mural, which is great because you can post pictures up onto it, and you put little comments to it, you put videos up, links to Instagram. Instagram's actually a great resource, I find, because you have lots of experimental things on there. So yeah, I mean, kind of as I said previously, research and reference like a big thing for me. Trying to justify the work you're creating, give it a reasoning, is just something I learned when I was at art school. And me referencing classic art is something I think with classic art that's something I've come to appreciate a bit more in my older
Yeah.
life now, rather than was at kind of art school, something where I kind of look forward to know what's everyone else doing, what's kind of more modern illustration and things like this. But I think there's certain imagery, composition, colours that are used by in those classical paintings that are just still stand a test of time now and are a great template to base your work on. And so I now reference back to classical paintings a lot, classical artwork. That along with kind of science as well, photography and nature. I think of those sort of my three main areas where I pull most of my reference and research from. In terms of other areas I used on the show that maybe I don't know about, I don't know. I think there's a lot of them I don't say about. I still like the orb from the Burning
Yeah.
Man that I use as for the Shirom, because that was like almost felt like a big white pearl in the sky. I think it starts off chrome. I'm pretty sure it just gets dirtier over the days, so it gives a really interesting look to it. Saying light painting as well. Light painting, I've said previously, is my biggest inspiration for channeling, because when I was joining the show, I was like, I saw what happened in season one. I really wanted to change it. I wanted to bring the colors in because I thought that was needed. Because I think when you establish what color represents what, I think it's really interesting and effective in a quick channeling scenario, especially like a fight, where someone can tell what flavors, as I call them, or powers of the channeling are being used, and then it's just what's that physical representation of the channeling. And as soon as I was actually struggling for it for a bit, and then I saw the light painting, photography, and I was like, straight away, that's it. It had such a thready quality to it, a delicacy, but it could also feel very powerful as well, especially when you started doing a lot of it. And then we just took that on with adding, like with dust particles coming off the earth, channeling, of fire embers coming off the fire, channeling, adding our own little kind of touches to it, and then the way it moves around people is really, really important, the quantity of it. And then even again, we've developed that. The show's gone on. Nynaeve channels in her own very specific way, shorter, sharper, very furious around her. That's Rafe wanted Nynaeve to feel very different in the way she channeled. So as I say, the light painting, that's my basis for it. I've got oodles of reference, I think, that I use on the show that I don't think I tried to base it on just one thing. It's usually a collection of many, many things together.
Yeah. You definitely need to post some of that online at some point. I know a lot of people were really excited to see what you were posting about just, Monet and Friedrich, and I don't know, like, I think that's one of those aspects for me where it's very cool just to see, like, how the idea becomes reality and what people are taking from. But I wanted to talk a little bit about episode 1 because I feel like there were so many things that happened in this episode that I don't think that you've maybe talked about yet. One of the things was Varen's and Naomi's compulsion weave, and maybe just compulsion as a whole. But specifically in episode 1, there's a lot going on with Varen. There's the compulsion happening. We do get this, before that happens, this moment of her. I don't know if it was a gateway or some type of illusion where she's able to kind of open into the wall into the 13th depository, and then we get the channeling. Would you mind going into these scenes a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in terms of variant, I'm glad we're talking about variant because I don't think I've
Yeah.
discussed it that much. The 30th depository reveal, God, there was like hours of conversations about this in pre-production, and I think it turned out being something simpler than what we all thought. That the entry into the 13th depository was not like a hidden door. This was something that was behind a solid wall. So it's really hard to get into. And so Verin has this earth weave that she does to essentially open up and almost cut into the wall and make it disintegrate. She should kind of gently disintegrate the fragments of the walls, almost
Yeah.
dust-like, and they part and reveal this circular entrance. So that's a specific, I would say, 13th depository entry
Yeah.
weave. It definitely wasn't any sort of portal, gateway, or illusion, because I know there is an illusion weave. No, this was kind of moving solid
Okay.
matter. Not like a riven earth weave, which is what Alana does in the streets, but this is something specific for them to get into the 13th depository. And then, once they're inside the 13th depository, it's actually, I think, the first time we've ever done any sort of cutting
It was
weave,
so cool, so
because
cool.
it's
It's
very
so
quick.
quick.
There's only two people who do cutting weave in the show. Very, and then
Lanfear? Yeah.
Lanfear does it in 308 when she releases herself from Morraine's air weave in the desert. So yeah, that's fire channeling, because fire channeling is really sort of dramatic and feels like it could cut through something, and it's very sort of a quick swipe weave for the cutting weave. And she's obviously using that against Naomi with her what we call the lobotomy
Okay.
weave, to to remove memories. For the way that for the lobotomy weave, the way it appears, I'd actually looked at, well, how do we get the channeling to perform for our lobotomy weave, and then I was actually looking at sort of more I'd say Victorian lobotomy surgery
Oh, wow. So, like, you really
sort of
mean
tools.
lobotomy when you
Yeah,
say lobotomy.
yeah, I do. Yeah, yeah. So I was looking at all kind of weird hammers and stuff like this, things for um, gouging into the skull, and then I found a guy something I think that had almost like a corkscrew kind of end to it to drill into the skull, and I was like, okay, well, the twisting together of the different powers we use will probably be quite an interesting look at this idea that we then give, or is of the drilling into the
Yeah.
head, was really sort of my main decision on that. So I think it worked really well, especially when we use it again in episode 3, where it drills into the child
Yeah.
bride's head at the Tanjiko wedding.
That makes it so much more sinister now that I think about it.
I believe, I remember correctly, I think sound actually added a
Oh my
drill, kind
gosh.
of a very high pitched drill sound to it as well. I think if you listen to it, especially during that Tanjiko wedding sequence, which again, when the sound's added with the visual effects, it makes it really,
Makes
really
everything
work.
pop. There was also too in the beginning in 301 during the White Battle or the White Tower battle, there was also like a slicing weave that we saw where the woman is kind of just cut in half and then goes down. That was a new one too. I don't think we've seen anything like that yet in the show.
And now the official title for that is the Black Argent Airblade.
Okay.
That's different. So we actually did two designs. One was a Black Aja air blade, and one was an Aes Sedai air blade. The Aes Sedai air blade would have been, we never actually used it in the end, would have been more kind of similar, sort of kind of in size, very thin, but almost like a pizza cutter
Mhm.
wheel kind of thing. Whereas the Black Aja air blade is a bit more sort of aggressive
Yeah.
looking with those big blades running around the outside of it, almost like a ninja star kind of thing. Yeah, that was again a deliberate choice. We wanted to have this sort of spinning, turning behavior, was it? Because it had to cut through an Aes Sedai, a sandal steps, and also stone pillars. So having this circular saw kind of performance, I think, was needed to help sell those kind of events happening.
Yeah. I'm just curious, if you haven't, no big deal. Have you gotten into some of the later books of the series or no?
Well, in terms of reading the books, I've read up to and including The Shadow Rising,
Okay.
and then beyond that, yes, I've had to like I really don't mind about
Okay.
spoilers. I've had to look at other things that go on ahead, not in massive detail, but a general idea. And then we obviously work with Sarah Nakamura on the
Mhm.
show. She's there if I need to ask her about certain things. Um, there's in terms of have I put anything in there from future books? There's stuff in there, especially Tar Valon on the approach. There's something there that book readers will go, it's it's those things outside of Tar Valon that may be used later. You'll notice there's two towers either side of the river that have chains leading into the water. That's all
Ah.
I'll say for that one.
I know where you're going with this.
River
I know
chains.
exactly where
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
going with
So
this. Wow.
yeah, there are certain things that I've dropped in there knowing their importance later on. Um, but that's not the kind of exclusive. Yeah, I love dropping in little kind of Easter egg moments here and
Yeah.
there, little subtle hints and stuff because I know the fan base will go for it. It's like bloodhounds. So it's a deliberate ploy on my
Yeah,
part.
I mean, the reason I asked is because this cut that happens to this woman, when I saw that, I was like, "Oh, that's" I mean, there's something very similar that happens in Lord of Chaos, where there is a battle where we see something like that on a very, like, very large scale, and so getting this little piece of it in 301, I was like, "Wow," like, now we're starting to see the very I mean, like, the really deadly stuff where we see the one power where it can be a tool, but we don't often get to see something that is so much like a weapon just visually, where this looks like a blade. And I mean, that's just going back to one of the first questions that I asked you, where we're getting to see more and more new things with the one power and how that develops over time, which is just very cool.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the brown eyes being chopped in half, that was in the script anyway. So I assume obviously the script writers done their research on that and were hinting at maybe things to come. The interesting thing about it is, in terms of visual effects, a lot of it was kind of done practically, and we've stitched together different
Mhm.
takes. So the top half is filmed separately to the bottom half, wherever the slice happens. We've added in the CG Black Archer Airblade, we've added in CG blood as well. But in terms of the brown Archer, who kind of have the cut and slide moment happening. If you look on YouTube, there's a lot of there's a specific YouTube video. I think it's called Cut and Slide from different movies where people are cutting half. Um, yeah, we did ours with a kind of like a practical approach and then comping together different passes. Where one, in one of them, she's wearing, I think she's wearing green tights on her legs. And then on that one, we just wanted to have just see the legs themselves. And we're just essentially piecing together a little bit like a jigsaw
Yeah.
piece and then using other digital components to cover certain things up or add to it.
So, going back again to 301, we have this attack on Rand and his group that was orchestrated by Lanfear and Morraine to an extent where we have the mirror images of Rand coming to life. How did the process go with that one where these other Rands in terms of, like, them coming out of the mirror, how they were supposed to look or feel. What was that like?
That was, again, that's coming out the scripts, and they're able to base that very heavily on the books, as you know, from the
Mhm.
Shadow Rising, being the bubbles of evil, which is a kind of I think, an after effect of the Dark One being released from his
Yeah.
prison. I mean, in the show, they've called them the Lanfear bubbles of
Mhm.
evil. Lanfear plays a part, but I don't think it's ever established or mentioned. She doesn't create those events happening. She plays her part somehow, but we don't know how she's played her part. That's all I'll say. Did anyone see her channel that stuff? No. So she's had some involvement, but maybe not as directly as people think. I'll just dangle that carrot out there. Um, I had to put a lot of responsibility on my onset suit for that, on my onset VFX suit, Grant Everett, who was great for me. It was quite a challenge at that point because we were finishing off season two's visual effects. I was deep into working on episode 8 of season 2 at that point. So I couldn't be on set much for season 3, especially at the start. So I had to put a lot of faith into on-set soup. So I have a lot of kind of discussions on phone calls and things like this, and then put my faith in them to kind of see it through for me on set. But Grant, who covered for me for that particular scene, did a really good job. It's shot in a kind of quite a smart way for us, with different parts, especially with the mirror
Yeah.
rands. There's quite a bit of face replacement work as well with stunt doubles, who obviously wearing the same thing as what Yosha was, similar in build as well. And so we're just doing replacement of faces. And then in terms of the mirror rands, well, there was no mirror there on the day. The mirror, that we had the frame, and then we'd have Rand Yosha come doing his performance of being the mirror Rand coming out. And then we digitally put the glass in, and then we had this kind of shatter effect happening on the mirror as his mirror form comes out. That was kind of inspired by shatter artists who work with glass, kind of doing portraits and shattering glass. That's quite interesting. And you see that a little bit when Egwene launches a blast, I think an air weave towards the mirror and explodes. You see him shatter very quickly. So there was a bit of sort of inspiration of that from glass shatter artists. But again, I really liked how that worked out, especially in some of the ones where there's a mirror on top of a chest of drawers where Rand comes out, and just seeing how the glass kind of all shatters and forms around Mirror Rand's limbs as he comes out and then pops back in, I think was kind of a cool looking effect.
Yeah.
I like it when it happens quickly as well, to give the audience almost wanting more, kind of, oh, what happened there, sort of
I
feel.
remember when the trailer came out and there's just, like, a very quick shot of that scene in the trailer, and that was one that a lot of people really latched onto because, you're caught up in looking at the weaves and the channeling, but then for a split second, you see the mirror Rands, and then it's like, "Oh." Where they almost have this, like, liquid, almost like mercury type feeling to them. That was another just really cool.
Yeah, when they explode, they definitely do. When you see the mirror rounds explode on the ground, when Rand does his little blast of channeling to explode all the mirrors, they tend to all go more
Yeah.
glass-like, which I think, as soon as they do that, as I say about when you create certain things, you can't help sometimes but overlap with creations from other films and TV. So I think the
Yeah.
T1000 from Terminator 2, I'm pretty sure came up. But it's only that split instance where they went into this reflective mirror mode that happened.
There was so there's so many moments in this season where I was going through a lot of the images that you sent me, and I was also trying to think of things that you hadn't brought up yet. And another one was Alana's channeling with the twins and Daisy Conger and this linking moment. Would you wanna kind of walk me through Alana's channeling in 20 or
Mm-hmm.
307?
Yes, like 307. That's great. Yeah, linking. We had. I think I can remember there being almost 3 or 4 versions of linking happening throughout the show. Ones that stick out to me most is when we have the Black Aja link
Yeah.
towards the end of the main hall tower fight in the White Tower. Then we have Alana linking with the twins and Days in Two Rivers, and then we have the sitters all linking when they go to Still Swamp in 308. So how I talk about with channeling, it can behave in different ways. Even with the linking, is the same thing. It's very fast, furious, and aggressive when the Black Aja do it in the towards the end of the main hall tower fight in 301. It's almost like a tornado flying around them. It's a little bit more gentle when I do it with Alana linking with the ladies from the Two Rivers. They're not particularly experienced at channeling, and she's just literally pulling power through them. So I didn't want to feel too forced and aggressive. I thought Alana
Yeah.
would probably need to be a little delicate in what she does there, and then she takes the power and she deals with any sort of the aggression, the stress, and the strain of it as well. I mean, you even see it start to just slowly burn out in the cheeks and face when she really screams with rage and power just before the ice blades drop from the sky. This idea of seeing channeling flowing through like a chain link, the channelers, and then linking up to a main point person has always been my imagining of how linking works.
There was one thing that I really wanted to cover before we wrap things up, and that's Morraine's first experience channeling with the Sarkarnan in the beginning of episode
5.
305.
Yeah.
And that, I think, was just, in terms of the show, we've got a lot of aggressive channeling. We've got moments where it feels very relaxed and almost euphoric. And I really loved this moment so much because, for one, the landscape, beautiful, stunning. And then when you add in the weaves of this almost like wave-like, very delicate, but also very, very strong looking weaves that are kind of boosting her from the Sarkarnan. What was that like for you guys deciding, do we go bigger, more powerful, or do we tone it down a little bit? Because there's so many different ways that you could do that scene, I feel like, and how it turned out, I thought was perfect, but
Yeah, they, the way Sakanan was described to me, that essentially what we think back to what Morraine does at the end of episode 8 in season 2, what she does with Sakanan, she almost boosts her power tenfold.
yeah,
I mean, she doesn't channel a huge amount into the Sakanan at the start of 305 because I think she's in that experimental stage. There's a bite back from the Sakanan, but it throws weaves back at her quite early on
yeah,
when she starts experimenting with it. So she's quite softly the way that she's using it and gently reaching out with it. I really like the idea of it being something that goes 360 degrees around it to really give that sense of scale and epicness. There's always, with any sort of big channeling moment with Morraine, there's a discussion I have with Rosamund Pike, who plays Morraine, because she's so she's incredibly professional and committed to her role, that it's really great to get her input into what she was thinking at the time. She did a lot of work with the choreographer Scarlett on her body movements for that. It's almost like a dance that she does. So getting her input is vital for me in how I'm going to interpret and then implement the channeling with her performance. But I think, always striking me off, it was about vast amounts of channeling coming out, and then they start to rearrange the desert around into
yeah,
these geometric patterns, I think is how it was described in the script originally. And so it's a case of, we knew where we needed to end up with these sort of geometric sand dunes formed out, curled around her. Then how are we going to build up to that? And so that's why I say I felt like I just need these big waves of channel that came out 360 degrees just to really sell that sense of power, epicness, scale as well.
yeah,
There was a sense of power that she's using, a sense of beauty as well, but also that danger element from the way it kind of bites back at Morraine, and then she starts to burn out towards the end. We have that really nice touch, which actually came from Frame Story worked on the channeling for me on the show, where we start to see the bones silhouetting through as her flesh lights up from beneath her skin, which I thought looked great. as well as then the veins in her face sort of to glow up in light, and really selling that idea of burning out, taking on too much power that it can destroy you. So yeah, I mean, you've got lots of different kind of elements of that. So, and it's just for me, or just all those different desires and requirements, they always form an image in my head pretty quickly,
Yeah.
and then we tweak them as we go along.
So before we wrap it up, one last question. This is kind of like a hypothetical. So if the show continues and we get a season 4, is there something where, like, if you had just the if you were given the full power and was like, Andy, we want you to do something really, really cool, come up with something on your own. Is there something where you've thought about, like, for the future that would just be really cool for you to do or see?
I think seeing Rand using the one power, kind of, I would say more deliberately, but in
Mhm.
an attacking sense. We saw it very briefly at the end of episode 6, where he defends himself from a Samael attack and then launches lightning bolts onto him. I
That was
think
so
there's,
cool.
yeah,
So
yeah.
cool.
Again, there's something I'm really surprised how that got received by everyone. It seemed to go down really well, but obviously the whole, and this is book spoilers if you're going to book 3, with Tyr, Stone of Tyr,
Mm,
Kalendor, that part of the story is being pushed later.
yeah,
I can't say for sure when exactly it is, but I've already thought about when I read that in the books. That felt quite cool when he's in the Stone of Tyr, and I think there's Charlock armies attacking him and things like this. That felt quite spectacular. And channeling in dark spaces could look fantastic. It's been to do with fire channeling. You think of just before that moment in at the end of episode 6, we have our one power Isle spears being formed by
Avienda,
Avienda.
yeah.
So again, a one power Isle spears look great. Fire channeling, dark environments, fantastic. When I listened to that moment in the books with Rand and Stone of Tyr and the attack they do, the attack by the Dark Friends and Trollocs and things like this, I thought that could play out something that could be really cool and dramatic. And I'll be honest, for season 4, because I always think you're kind of making steps of improving it. If it was to do a season 4, I'm pretty sure that I could create stuff that would probably most I confidently say the most iconic imagery of like modern day fantasy television because of
Yeah,
how I imagine it happening. I feel like I'm pretty confident we could create something pretty special for that.
yeah, and I mean, with season 3, I think you guys are already on your way of just I think visually this show is really just fantastic. It's not it's quite a bit different, I feel like, than a lot of other different fantasy television and sci-fi for that matter as well, because it's not, it's not like space sci-fi, but there's
Mhm.
even something like the Balefire has this very scientific, almost physics type background to it. And so like you've got so much in terms of what if, what is possible, what could be, and I think that's really one of the gifts of the show, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, we always look to improve as well. I think even with channeling, I think I'd evolve it again. It's all about evolving, evolution with these looks. So it happens regularly in other shows, and I think we've got a good base for channeling now. I still think
Looks
there's
great.
areas we could make it look even better.
Yeah.
But I'm glad how all that work's been received and gone down. It's been a big challenge working on the show just because of the quantity and the very restricted time we've had this time. Because obviously the release between seasons has been a year and a half rather than 2 years. So
Yeah.
there is a big amount of time pressure involved with that. Time can be probably your biggest challenge when you're doing this work of getting it all done, getting the iterations, getting it to a place where you're happy. But the end result in season 3 was great because I feel like it's taken everything up again. It's been really well received, and so for that, I feel pretty satisfied.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much. This was really just a lot of fun getting to pick your brain about all of this. And is there anything that you're currently working on that I can direct people to go check
No,
out?
for the first time in like 4 or 5 years, I'm having a bit of a break, and I did it, like, about 6 weeks off, not do anything,
Yeah,
which would be good, which would be nice, and then just, come back recharged mentally for whatever is thrown at me next.
whatever is thrown at you next. Okay, well, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much, and hoping for season 4.
Thank you very much for having you on the show.